This is the Fantasy Ladder Podcast, episode 40. I'm your host, Steve, at Fantasy Ladder. This podcast is brought to you by the IDP Guys Network. So, welcome back once again, my fantasy football friends and family. Let's climb the ladder of fantasy football together. So, we are now in week 16 of NFL action. It was a pretty wild week 15, the opening week of your fantasy football playoffs or the semifinals, depending on how your commissioner had your league set up. But in large, the first round. So in week 15, we saw the largest comeback of all time in a game. It was an unbelievable contest between the Colts and the Vikings, but the Vikings came back from 33 nothing, and yeah, just amazing to see, amazing to watch. And then we saw one of the most bizarre endings with the New England Patriots against the Las Vegas Raiders. Really, just an unbelievably bizarre ending to that game where the Patriots, of course, lateraled the ball away, and then the Raiders won as time was expiring, essentially. So, yeah, wild game. And we had a couple of pretty devastating injuries. Tyler Lockett broke his hand or a bone in his hand. He did play the vast majority of the game last Thursday night, so he had a pretty decent PPR performance, but he will be out definitely this week, most likely the next 2 weeks at least. It would be shocking if he is back. In any kind of relevant fashion for the fantasy football playoffs, unfortunately. Jonathan Taylor on season ending IR. He left that Colts Vikings game very early in that contest. That was really brutal for people who had him into their starting lineups, but it's the way it goes. Just really, really unfortunate. And then Damian Pierce also on a season ending IR. So the Texans were already kind of a shaky situation, but now without Damian Pierce, now that that was announced leading up to the game, so you were able to get him out of your lineup last week. But either way, we will not be seeing any more of the rookie who has been very surprisingly good. It's been fantastic to see, but unfortunately, no longer will be seeing him anymore this season. So yeah, I just want to get those notes off the top out because they are pretty significant, and it's just very unfortunate timing in the playoffs, losing players who were just solid starters for you for the most part. So before we get into the Week 16 matchups, I'm going to go through the listener start sit questions and then break down the matchups first with the typical Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night contests. Then I'm going to cover all the Saturday games and then the two games remaining on Sunday. So kind of an odd slate this week with it being Christmas and all. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. So got a lot of games here on Saturday, which of course would be Christmas Eve. But either way, let's jump right into the listener start sit questions, starting with at return of the sack. He asks in a PPR, he's going to list off a stable of running backs that he is choosing from. Unsure at this moment of how many he needs to pick here, but he rattles off Isaiah Pacheco, Jarek McKinnon, Kenneth Walker, Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., and Rashad White. So to me, the first two that pop out to me are Jarek McKinnon and Kenneth Walker, both in the same matchup, actually. If you can get both of them in your lineup, I would choose those two. If I had to pick one or the other, I will take McKinnon here, only because at this moment, Walker is questionable. He is slated to play. But give me Jarek McKinnon. Just keep riding that hot hand. He has been a beast thus far in the fantasy football playoffs. So I'll just kind of ride the hot hand with McKinnon over those other options. But my basic order of preference amongst this group here would be McKinnon, Walker, Rashad White, and then Mostert, then Pacheco, and then Jeff Wilson. So hopefully you found that useful, and thanks for thanks for asking, and best of luck. Next question is coming from at C Mac at C sorry at C Mac Donald underscore asking to start three running backs. He rattles off Jarek McKinnon, Travis Etienne, Joe Mixon, and Alvin Kamara. McKinnon going up against the Seattle Seahawks, as I mentioned in the previous question. Travis Etienne, New York Jets on Thursday Night Football. Joe Mixon against the New England Patriots, and Alvin Kamara against the Browns. In this one, I am going to be sitting Travis Etienne with this group, so I'll be starting McKinnon, Mixon, and Kamara. The Jets are still a very strong defense. Don't love that. ETN did fumble last week. That's not going to shy me away from starting him, generally speaking. But I think that the real tough call here for me is between ETN and Mixon. So Mixon, another decently tough matchup against the Patriots. So if you went with either one of those two, kind of a kind of a coin toss for me, but I would lean on the side of starting Mixon, and then of course Kamara and McKinnon, and benching ETN on Thursday Night Football. Then we have another question from at Brandon underscore Kaiser, of course, from the Barbarian Horde. So thank you for asking, Brandon. He asks Garrett Wilson against the Jaguars on Thursday night or J.K. Dobbins against the Atlanta Falcons. Half PPR. So, very good matchup here for Garrett Wilson against the Jaguars. Love that matchup. But I like Dobbins against Atlanta just a little bit more, even with likely to be Tyler Huntley starting again. Give me Dobbins here. Just he's been super hot, and Wilson has been obviously very good over the last few weeks here. I don't need to tell you that, but I would prefer the upside of Dobbins against the Falcons. So good luck to you, sir. Hopefully, we don't hear from you in the Tilt channel. So yeah, thanks for asking and good luck, buddy. We have another question from at Triathlete Chef. He has a DST question. Of course, they will lose points in this setting. They will lose points for yards and points allowed. He asks about the Lions against the Carolina Panthers, the Browns against the New Orleans Saints, the Broncos against the Rams, the Rams against the Broncos. I think it's a fair question. And then Steelers against the Raiders, Jaguars against the Jets, and Chargers against the Colts. Definitely a lot of good options here, but definitely give me the Broncos against the Rams. One of my favorite streamers of the previous week was the Packers against the Rams, so I will just continue to try to exploit that pretty bad offense in Los Angeles right now, led by Baker Mayfield. Just not a lot of point scoring potential, and obviously definitely a lack of ceiling in the yards category. Broncos are still a solid defense. Give me them against the Rams all day. Then he asks, full PPR is the setting, looking for two running backs and two flex plays of this group of 7 players. He asks a lot of familiar names. So Alvin Kamara, J.K. Dobbins, Travis Etienne, Ramondre Stevenson is a new one to the fold against the Cincinnati Bengals, George Pickens against the Raiders. Darius Slayton against the Vikings, and Hollywood Brown against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In this question, I'm going to be going with all the 4 running backs. So Kamara against the Browns, Dobbins against the Falcons, Etienne against the Jets, and Ramondre Stevenson against the Bengals. I'd be fine sitting Pickens against the Raiders, Slayton against Minnesota, both of those despite being good matchups, and Hollywood Brown. Pretty much all of the Cardinals are going to be downgraded a bit for me this week with Colt McCoy out. So already it's kind of, non exciting for fantasy, but now he's out, and now they will turn to Tracy McSorley being the starter there as a Penn Stater. I'm thrilled about that. I'm very excited, but I'm very skeptical still about the fantasy football prospects there against the Bucks. So can definitely sit Hollywood, and then for me, I just think the general upside. With the running backs is higher at this point than with Pickens and with Slayton, despite the decent matchup. So it's definitely a fair question, but give me all the running backs there. Then we have a question from at TNFF underscore auction Joe. So we got my guy Joe. He's a auction drafting enthusiast like myself. So please give Joe a follow. He's got fantastic content. Is a great guy to interact with, and he knows his auction drafting. So love Joe and love all the people at the on with the True North fantasy football crew. He asks a single QB question, asking about Justin Herbert going up against the Indianapolis Colts or Justin Fields against the Buffalo Bills in a 6 point per passing touchdown league. At this point, it's really difficult to not play Fields, right? Um, and, it's a tough matchup against the Buffalo Bills, but Fields is getting it done on the ground. And he has been getting it done. It's not just like here and there, it's like every single week. So I would understand why you would want to continue to roll with Fields. However, in this particular week, I would be going with Justin Herbert. The passing touchdown potential is just higher with Herbert week to week than with Fields. So I will lean on that against the Colts in a pretty high um, over under point total with 46 in that matchup compared to 40, which is still pretty decent for the Bears. But give me Justin Fields by just a hair, or sorry, give me Justin Herbert by just a hair over Fields. But definitely would understand if you sided with Fields in this one, Joe. So thanks for asking, everybody, and best of luck. Hopefully, you found that helpful, and don't be shy about asking for future weeks or follow ups before the starts of the games. So yeah, best of luck and thanks for asking. So we're going to dive into all the matchups here of the Week 16 slate. Going to start with Thursday Night Football, the Jacksonville Jaguars at the New York Jets. Over under is set at 37 right now. So there are a few sub 40 games this week. Some of that could be because of the weather factor. A lot of these games on the East Coast, especially the Northeast sort of region of the country, it's going to be cold. It's going to be very, very cold. Um, some snow and things like this. So this one will be in, North Jersey. Uh, so the Jags at the New York Jets, 37 point over under. Basically on the Jaguar side of the ball, if Trevor Lawrence is active. He's currently questionable. If he's active, definitely starting him. I think you could feel very confident about a lot of the pieces in this offense, despite it being a tough matchup with the Jets. So I would still feel confident starting Travis Etienne. I would still feel confident starting Christian Kirk. And Zay Jones would also be a flex play here. Then Evan Ingram, I think you can roll with him as a tight end play. So I am trusting all of those five Jaguars. Um, Zay Jones would be more of the trust if you must range, but definitely like how the Jaguars offense is operating. So despite it being a tough matchup, potentially low scoring with the weather, still like those options. On the New York Jets side of the ball, Zach Wilson will get the start once again. He actually played pretty good. Definitely better for fantasy sake rather than the real life results. However, I was very encouraged by what he did against the Lions, and that was basically expected. It's like if he still had a very poor fantasy floor against a team like the Lions, where it could be points galore, it'd be very, very disheartening. But I was encouraged by that. So another opportunity for him to do well here. So having said that, Zach Wilson is a super flex play. Garrett Wilson is a trust, but more of a flex caliber play. And then Zonovan Knight is an if you must running back option. Very strong weeks, three in a row before last week. I didn't really love him last week, so glad that that didn't work out for my sake. But I think you could kind of roll with him again. I still question the role that Michael Carter is going to have at this point, and as long as James Robinson is still a healthy scratch, still like Zonovan Knight quite a bit against the Jaguars. So beyond Garrett Wilson, not a lot of the pass catchers I would really feel super confident starting in this one. Um, As far as the tight ends go, typically like Tyler Conklin is like the guy you want to throw in there. But CJ Uzama got it done last week, so that's just kind of a mess. Really would just prefer to not start any of them if possible. But in a desperation play, I think I could start either one, which isn't a lot of fun, but either way, it's just the state of a tight end for you. Moving on to Sunday Night Football, got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Arizona Cardinals. As I mentioned in the listener question there, Trace McSorley is making his first career start here against the Buccaneers. So it's a big stage for him, on Sunday Night Football. And again, as a Penn State alum, I'm very excited for Trace McSorley. He was a fantastic quarterback at Penn State, but really have my really going to be limiting my expectations for him in the fantasy realm against the Buccaneers. So basically, having said that, all of the Cardinals offensive skill position players are going to be downgraded a bit for me here, with the exception of James Conner. Still going to be rolling with him, but definitely I'm still just going to be limiting expectations for everyone in that offense. But DeAndre Hopkins, hard to not get him in your starting lineup. He's still a trust, but with limited expectations. And then Hollywood Brown is kind of a desperation flex play at this point. And Trey McBride, the rookie tight end, is a deep league tight end play. On the Tampa Bay Buccaneers side of the ball, definitely like a lot of the Bucks here. Love Brady here. Love Mike Evans. Love Chris Godwin. Love Leonard Fournette and Rashad White. Both of them in this matchup. As far as the tight ends go, Cade Otton and Cameron Brate are both like desperation tight end plays. So don't love it, just like with the Jets, but definitely a good opportunity to get some catches here, put some points up against the Cardinals struggling defense. So that'll do it for Sunday Night Football. Moving on to Monday Night Football, got the Los Angeles Chargers at the Indianapolis Colts. So Colts made a quarterback change this week. They're benching Matt Ryan and they're starting Nick Foles. So very exciting as an Eagles fan. You always are looking for that Nick Foles magic. However, Jonathan Taylor is done for the season, as I mentioned off the top of the show. So just a lot of the expectations for the offense overall are kind of minimized here. Although in relief of Jonathan Taylor, Zach Moss did play very well. So he is definitely an add as far as like your roster goes. Would I feel comfortable starting him in my playoffs? I would not. You'd have to be pretty desperate. I think there is a world that exists where you could justify getting him into your starting lineup. I am not going to like it though. So Foles would come in as a desperation super flex play, borderline at that. Michael Pittman is more of a flex play just because of the unknowns of what Foles is going to bring to the table. And then beyond him, all the other pass catchers that are typically in your starting lineup are definitely not really feasible this week. Maybe Alec Pierce if you're desperate once again. On the other side of the ball, Chargers, I'm starting all my Chargers. Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Gerald Everett. You're not going to overthink this. Start all your Chargers. So definitely trustworthy at all those positions. I just rattled off. Okay, so we're going to move on to the Saturday games. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 games on Saturday. Christmas Eve, of course. So we'll just roll through them. We got the Buffalo Bills at the Chicago Bears. Over under is set at 40 points here. On the Bears side of the ball, you can still trust Justin Fields. I think you can borderline kind of like if you must trust if you must. David Montgomery, still a great player, just a tough matchup here. Even though Raheem Mostert did perform extremely well against the Bills, still just I don't know. If I have him, I'm probably going to be starting him. I'm just not going to love it this week. And then Cole Kmet just continues to be a mystery. Not really in any rush to get him in the starting lineup at this point. Any of the pass catchers I really am not going to feel great about from a fantasy perspective, but you can still kind of rely on Justin Fields if he continues to run the ball like he has been. On the Buffalo Bills side of the ball, obviously you're trusting Josh Allen, you're trusting Stephon Diggs. I think anyone outside of those two, it just gets a little iffy. So Dawson Knox had a big week last week against the Dolphins, but he's very up and down. I think he's an if you must tight end play. And as far as the wide receivers, after Stephon Diggs is concerned, most of them are going to be deeper league plays. So Gabe Davis, Isaiah McKenzie, it's just great to get a piece of the Bills offense. However, you just don't know who is going to be taking off week in and week out. But definitely most reliable is Stephon Diggs. As far as the running backs are concerned, Devin Singletary and James Cook are both very interesting options, but they kind of are eating into each other's production a bit. So they would be more of a flex level trust borderline if you must plays there against the Bears. Moving on to the New Orleans Saints at the Cleveland Browns. This game is set at 32.5, and this is the lowest of the week at this point, which is pretty shocking. But I think it's just because there's going to be like just crazy weather, snow, really cold in Cleveland over the weekend. So keep an eye out for that. It could really limit things in the passing game. It could really boost things, however, in the rushing game, ideally. So Nick Chubb has been not practicing much of this week, so maybe it's just like a maintenance thing. Maybe he legitimately might not play. If he's active, though, you can definitely trust him. Deshaun Watson is a super flex play at best at this point. Definitely has not had the start that some of the football fans and fantasy fans have been wanting. But he just has not been lighting up the stat sheet, if you will. So definitely don't want to rely on him in general, but also because of the potential weather in this one. Furthermore, a lot of the pass catchers in this one, it might not feel as great getting them into your starting lineup. However, still a lot of talent there, right? So Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, and David Njoku typically are trustworthy options. I will kind of treat them as borderline trust if you must options in this one. And then on the Saints side of the ball, um, don't really want to start Andy Dalton if I can help it. Even in a super flex league, just don't really want to go down that road if I can help it. And it's just unfortunate for players like Chris Olave. Again, the passing attack just may be limited. So great guy to have on your team. Just hard to trust him in your lineups this week. Although I would consider him a deeper league flex play, just on account of the weather. And then the players that I'm most intrigued by would be the tight ends. So Juwan Johnson and Taysom Hill, I think, are interesting, as well as Alvin Kamara, of course, would come in as a trustworthy play against the Browns. Another 1 o'clock game on Saturday is the Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans with an over under set at 35.5. On the Titans side of the ball, the only pure trust here is Derrick Henry, and then a borderline trust, if you must, is Chig Onkwonu, the rookie tight end. Ryan Tannehill may not suit up in this one. Traylon Burks is likely to not suit up in this one. So definitely have limited expectations as far as the passing game goes, but I just think, Derrick Henry could just go absolutely nuts here against the Texans, leading me to the Texans. I don't want to start any Texans, to be honest. Don't have them in your lineup if you can help it. We will likely have Nico Collins back and Brandon Cooks back, and still with Davis Mills, who actually played respectfully or respectably against the Chiefs last week. I just don't want to trust any of these players in this offense for my fantasy semifinals or finals. Again, depending on when or how your league was set up there, but either way, don't want to trust any of the Texans. Moving on to what could be a very exciting matchup this weekend, the Seattle Seahawks at the Kansas City Chiefs with a 49-point over under. That is the second highest of the week, at least at this point. So Geno Smith is a borderline trust to if you must. Definitely a safe super flex play. Just hurts not having Tyler Lockett there, but DK Metcalf is still there. He should eat against the Chiefs. And then Marquise Goodwin. Nice stash. Not really ready to get him into starting lineups at this point. However, this could boost Noah Fant a bit in that passing game. So I do like Noah Fant as long as he is active. He is currently questionable, like seemingly half the league at this point. Just makes you want to pull your hair out, but it is what it is. As far as the running backs are concerned, definitely Kenneth Walker. If he is active, you can start him week in and week out, and that'll do it for the Seahawks. On the Kansas City Chiefs side of the ball, a lot of trustworthy options here. I think you can trust Mahomes, of course, Travis Kelsey, of course, Jarek McKinnon, and Isaiah Pacheco. I think you can definitely start both of them against the Seahawks here. And then as far as the pass catchers go, can still trust Juju Smith Schuster. And I think Marquez Valdez Scantling is an interesting option in deeper leagues. So more of an if you must overall, but more of a deep league interest there. Next game, we got the New York Giants at the Minnesota Vikings with another high over under set at 48. On the Giants side of the ball, pretty simple. Going to be trusting Daniel Jones as a low tight end one, as a for sure super flex play, and then of course Saquon Barkley. Anyone else in that offense, I just don't feel great about. So it just really depends on what your options are overall, depending on what your team's like injury situations like overall. I would rather not start, Darius Slayton or Daniel Bellinger. Even though it is a very nice matchup against the Vikings, there could be a lot of scoring in this one. I just would only really trust Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. On the Minnesota Vikings side of the ball, I'm starting all my Vikings here. Kirk Cousins, TJ Hawkinson, Dalvin Cook, Adam Thielen, and of course Justin Jefferson. As long as all these guys are active, you can start all of them. Even KJ Osborne had a fantastic game against the Colts in that comeback effort. Fine guy to add. Not really looking to want to start him in the semifinals unless it's kind of a desperation situation and it's a deep enough of a league. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals at the New England Patriots with a line set at 41.5 points. As far as the Bengals are concerned, I'm playing all my Bengals as long as they're healthy and active. Joe Burrow, Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and then Tyler Boyd would come in as a flex play. Like if you must level wide receiver at this point, we want Hayden Hurst back, but as long as he's out, that just really elevates a lot of those other big three wide receivers. And then on the New England Patriots side of the ball, the only player I'm really trusting in this offense right now is Ramondre Stevenson. Guy's an absolute tank. He's amazing. However, the pass catching options don't. I'm not super thrilled about starting any of them per se. The only one still remains is Jacoby Myers, and then Hunter Henry would be a deeper tight end play, more so for like a tight end premium. That would be the angle that you would want to feel comfortable having him in your lineup. And then Mac Jones would be just like a super flex option at this point, but would not feel great about it. He is someone who I touted a couple weeks ago on the TSS Fantasy Show as a waiver wire ad, just trying to maximize on some of these good matchups so that he had with the Cardinals and then the Raiders and now the Bengals. And he just has been subpar the last 2 weeks. So definitely not my best call there. But I just still feel fine about making that call. It just has been disappointing to see play out here. So don't want to rely on Mac Jones if you can help it, but still should be safe enough as a super flex play. Just more of a floor play there. So you're not going to love it, but that's where we're at. And then moving on to the Detroit Lions, the surging Lions against and at the Carolina Panthers with a 44 over under. So as far as the Lions are concerned, you can definitely trust Jared Goff, DeAndre Swift, Jamal Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think DJ Chark would come in as like a deeper flex play option, more of an if you must. On the Carolina side of the ball, Sam Darnold would barely come in here as a super flex play. DJ Moore is someone who I can trust. Outside of DJ Moore, I don't really want to start anybody on the Panthers if I can help it. So Deontay Foreman was one of the pretty prominent dud performances of Week 15. So still pretty shaken by that. Guys like Miles Sanders had a pretty awful game. Like Devontae Adams, like normally like reliable options, just did not show up last week, just to the caliber that they had been showing at this point of the season. So did Donta Foreman more of an if you must here. I'm not going to feel great about it in the leagues I have him in. I'm trying to avoid getting him in there. But I think a world exists where you could get him in your lineup. But yeah, last week was pretty brutal. Just continue to monitor Chuba Hubbard's usage there. He was just what was has been much more productive, at least last week and the week before. I think he did pretty good as well, filling in for Foreman. So not a lot of Panthers I'm going to start here, but I think DJ Moore is probably the most trustworthy, which still is not a great statement to say out loud, just with how he has been performing this season. Moving on to the Falcons at the Baltimore Ravens, so another one of these games in the Northeast where it's just going to be very cold. So on the Ravens side of the ball, I think J.K. Dobbins will come in as a trust. I think Gus Edwards would come in as like a deeper league flex play, more of a desperation flex play. But outside of Dobbins and Mark Andrews, there's really not a lot of players I would feel comfortable starting on the Ravens offense in this one. I think their defense is going to get them through this game. So there could be scoring opportunity, but and then especially today with Devin Duvernay, I think suffering a broken foot, he's likely going to be done for the season, at least like the fantasy football season. Um, at the bare minimum, don't really love a lot of the options there. Even Tyler Huntley has been a little bit disappointing, and he was I think he left the game early in Week 15 as well. So he'll likely get the start, but he's already coming in questionable during the week. On the Falcons side of the ball, Desmond Ritter once again will get the starts. So don't love him as even as a super flex play. I just think it's kind of good to just kind of monitor, see how he does, but don't want to be relying on him in the semifinals of your fantasy football playoffs. Um, Really, the Falcons I'm most interested in starting, if I had to, would still be Drake London in a deep league. If you need a fourth like wide receiver or something, it's like that kind of a level. Even then, more of a desperation play. And then Tyler Algier just absolutely crushed last week against the Saints. So I think he is an interesting option, but definitely still more of a deeper league flex play. And then just continue to utilize Cordero Patterson, even though that has been a little bit up and down as well. Moving on to the Washington Commanders at the San Francisco 49ers. So the 49ers defense is just completely legitimate. They are terrifying, they're frightening. But I think there are some pieces here in this Commanders offense that you can still rely on, despite it being a tough matchup. So Taylor Heineke is going to come in as a super flex play. Terry McLaurin as a trustworthy wide receiver. Brian Robinson as a trustworthy running back, despite the tough matchup. Limited expectations there. Antonio Gibson is kind of like a Gus Edwards at this point, just um, more of a floor play, more of a deeper league desperation, like deep flex play. Then as far as the wide receivers go, just very mixed with what Jahan Dotson is going to do or Curtis Samuel is going to do. They are both are pretty interestingly involved in the offense. They keep scheming touches for Curtis Samuel, so you love that. But still a tough defense. The Seattle Seahawks really struggled against the 49ers last week. So I think the Commanders did struggle against the Giants. I think they'll struggle once again here against the 49ers. So just kind of temper expectations for your Commanders, but I wouldn't necessarily shy away from them. On the 49ers side of the ball, can definitely trust a lot of these players here. Brock Purdy, of course, is a super flex play. Christian McCaffrey, of course, is a trustworthy running back play. Brandon Ayuk is another one of those duds from week 15. You can still rock with him more often than not, as well as George Kittle. So those are the big four in San Francisco. Moving on to Philadelphia Eagles at the Dallas Cowboys. This is a big one, of course. It's always a big one against Dallas from an Eagles fan's perspective, like myself. News came out that Jalen Hurts sprained his shoulder. The one report was that he'll miss 2 weeks, but then it wasn't exactly then Nick Sirianni wasn't exactly ruling him out just yet. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens here. I think Gardner Minshew in relief of Jalen Hurts is kind of an interesting super flex play just because of the weapons in the Eagles offense are still fantastic, right? Got Miles Sanders, Devonta Smith, AJ Brown, Dallas Goddard, who will be back this week. So you really love that. Coming off of the Cowboys, who really struggled, and then of course eventually lost to the Jaguars in overtime last week. So if Minshew can kind of build off of that and use all the weapons as well as he can, kind of an interesting spot start, but definitely a super flex play at that just because he hasn't started the game yet, So it's just tough. It just kind of changes the whole dynamic of the offense without Hurts in there. Um, but just keep an eye on it. If Hurts is active, it's going to be hard to not trust him despite the hurt shoulder. But just kind of a weird one. But I would just say roll with Hurts if he's active, but then roll with Minshew as a super flex play if you could help it. And I would continue to trust Miles Sanders despite the bad Week 15 performance against the Bears. Of course, Devonta Smith, of course, AJ Brown, and of course Dallas Goddard as long as he's active, which I believe he should be. Tempered expectations, of course, just because of Gardner Minshew, but would still be willing to trust all of those core Eagles there. Then on the Cowboys side of the ball, going to be trusting a lot of the Cowboys in this one with a 47-point over under. Should be a lot of scoring regardless of who the Eagles quarterback is. So the Dallas side of the ball, trusting Dak Prescott, Tony Pollard, Ezekiel Elliott, CD Lamb, and Dalton Schultz. Anyone outside of those five, or as anyone outside of CD Lamb and Dalton Schultz, from a pass catcher's perspective, it could just be very hit or miss. So don't want to be trust. I don't want to be trusting them in the playoffs at this point. But you can definitely trust the core five there with Dak, the running backs, CD Lamb, and Schultz. Moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders at the Pittsburgh Steelers, looking like Kenny Pickett is going to be back starting once again here at home uh, against the Raiders. 38.5 point over under projection at this point of the week. So on the Steelers side of the ball, you can trust Najee Harris. I think you can trust Deontay Johnson as long as he is healthy. And then Pat Fryermuth, again, another absolutely brutal dud, just an absolute bagel last week. It was horrible. That really hurt me in a couple spots, but still can trust with him just simply because of the tight end position being what it is. George Pickens would be more of a deeper league flex play. Just a lot of floor has been shown here the last couple of weeks, so just tempered expectations for him. Despite him, I think he's got a bright future ahead of him. Just would be kind of hard to trust him in the fantasy playoffs here. Then on the Raiders side of the ball, definitely going to be trusting Derek Carr, Devontae Adams, Josh Jacobs, of course, then Darren Waller. As long as he is active and on the field, can definitely rock with him once again. But anyone outside of those core four, don't exactly feel confident starting for the fantasy playoffs. That's a pretty simple one. Now we got the two games then on Sunday. The two remaining games on Sunday, except for the Sunday night football game, which we already covered. But the Sunday early slate, we'll be looking at the Green Bay Packers at the Miami Dolphins in the highest over under of the week. That's 49.5 points. So definitely a lot of players you want to throw into your lineups in this one. So in the Dolphins, you want to start Tua Tagovailoa if you're able to. He's definitely going to be a QB1, an obvious super flex play here. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, Raheem Mostert. You can definitely trust these guys in this one. Um, on the Packers side of the ball, you can definitely trust Aaron Rodgers. I think you can still trust Christian Watson and the running backs, Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon if he's in the game. He did leave the Monday night game with a concussion, but there was a report that he cleared the concussion protocol. So I think he would be interesting. He would be an interesting flex play in this one, but definitely roll with Aaron Jones. Now Romeo Dubes is back, so it's so interesting to see how he's going to be incorporated into the offense. But I think it's definitely better news for Aaron Rodgers overall. So now he's got a full arsenal of wide receivers again. Randall Cobb, Alan Lazard, Romeo Dubes, and Christian Watson. Hard to know which one's going to pop off, but that definitely, as far as a ceiling is concerned, Christian Watson would be the guy because of just that absolute tear he's been on the last few weeks, despite the down Monday night game where it was really just the running backs kind of taking things over. And then Robert Tunyon would be a deeper league tight end play as well in that one. Then we got the last game of the slate. That's the Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Rams with one of the lowest over-unders of the week with 36 and a half. So I believe the Denver Broncos are expecting Russell Wilson to be back. I mean, it's been brutal for Russell Wilson, but he's definitely an upgrade over Brett Ripon. So definitely have a little bit more confidence in Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton if he's active. I don't believe he was active last week. Then Greg Dulcich as well. Um, then as far as the running backs go, Latavius Murray has absolutely crushed it last week. I think you could utilize him as an if you must running back option. Overall, I would have the most trust in someone like Jerry Jeudy, but is a little bit more interesting if Russell Wilson is back, despite the overall struggles of the Broncos offense. Then the last Los Angeles Rams side of the ball, Baker Mayfield is barely a super flex play at this point. Don't really want to be trusting him for my fantasy playoffs. Cam Akers has been has kind of swung back up into fantasy relevance, so I like that. Definitely temper expectations because it is the Broncos here, but I think he could be utilized as a deeper league flex play. And then as far as the wide receivers go, Van Jefferson is at best a flex play in this one. And then Tyler Higbee would be a trustworthy tight end option. As far as yeah, so Tyler Higbee would be a trustworthy tight end option. And of the other pass catchers there for the Rams, like Tutu Atwell, um, fine to add, but definitely don't want to get into your starting lineup. So that's going to do it for week 16. So best of luck everybody in your fantasy matchups. There's a couple matchups that I had no business winning that I actually ended up winning, but then there's a couple that I was really counting on winning and came up a little bit short. So just try to enjoy it. Try to have fun. It is a very hectic and very stressful time with the holidays, and we care so much about our fantasy teams, but just embrace the wackiness of the results and just try to enjoy it as much as possible. These matchups don't come often. Obviously, the fantasy football playoffs only come around a couple weeks out of the year, so just embrace it, just enjoy it, have fun. Good luck and keep climbing. Enjoy the games. Merry Christmas and happy holidays. Enjoy.